What's up guys, welcome back to the channel. Today's video we're going to continue with our Firebase integration and actually start uploading some data into our Firebase app. So by the end of this video we should be able to create a new trip right here, add in our trip, which can be, New York. Hit continue. You'll notice the pages are navigating to add new data as we go, similar to our XD design. Obviously it's not styled, but on the first page you're going to add a location, the next page you add a date. Right now we're just we're going to fill it with just kind of dummy data because we really just want to see how to upload it to Firebase. So again, it's just using the current dates and location, and we didn't even add all the fields, but when we hit finish here, you'll see actually there's our new data that we just uploaded. So this video is going to give us the basic steps on how to do that. I'm not going to fully show you how to upload every piece of data, but I think once you see how to do it for one thing, it'll be pretty easy to update your app with all of the full data that you want to collect. All right, let's get started. All right, so the first thing we're going to do is actually start organizing up our files a little bit more, as we're going to be adding quite a few more files this time. So we're going to start to structure them a little bit. So go ahead and add a new package, and we're going to call this models. And in there, the only model we really have now is our trip model. So go ahead and move that into there. And then we'll create another package, and we're going to call this views. And right now we have the home view will be a view, and that's the only one right now. The main and the pages, actually this pages one is pretty much going to get deleted eventually, and they'll become views. We can just leave that there for now. All right, in the view, we're gonna actually go ahead and create a new package as well, and this is going to be for the new trips. So this will be another folder inside of views, because this is actually going to have a few screens. If you remember from our XD file, our design file, when we're creating a trip, we actually have about 6 different screens that we're going to need to create. So location, date, budget, etc. All these. So these are all going to go ahead and be inside of this new trips folder here. Package rather here. So let's go ahead and create just one new file for that right now. That'll be a Dart file. And the first one we're going to be doing is the location. So we'll just call that location view. Remember all this? Sure. We want to add these into our Git repository. All right, great. So this is a little bit cleaner of a structure. And as the app grows, this will be much easier to maintain. And you'll also notice everything should still run now. You'll notice the, like where we had, for instance, this home views, this was moved into this new, or it was moved into new trips, but it was moved into the views folder. And if you go into where it was called, that was actually updated just automatically in Android Studio. As you move the file, it just does that for us, which is very useful, very helpful. So everything should be good in that sense. So let's go ahead and add a bit of stuff to our location view. So the first thing we're going to want to do is import our material package, and then let's go ahead and create a new class. And this one we're just going to call the new trip, and this will be location. All of these are going to be prefaced with this new trip, and then we'll just add what type of new trip it is, and then end it with view. All right, this is going to be just a stateless widget for now. As we build it out with more details in it, it probably will become a stateful widget, but this is fine for now. So go ahead and create the build method. All right, and then here we're going to actually go ahead and return a brand new scaffold, because this is going to be a full new page. And because of the way this is going to work, we're not actually going to be keeping the bottom navigation, the tab bar navigation, on this when this page displays. And this is because when you start to create a new trip, we don't want people to go and click over onto Explorer or past trips or any other of those tabs. So we're going to actually just return a new scaffold. And we're going to give it the app bar. And then the body. All right, that actually needs to go up here. All right, and then on this page for now, let's just give it let's just add a text element, and we'll just say, you know, enter a location. And that's good for now. Now we need a way to get to this page. So we want to add that plus button up here on which is on our home widget. On our home widget here, we want to go ahead and find our app bar. After the title, we want to add an action. And this is going to be where we're going to put the icon button. And the icon button is going to take an icon, which is actually going to be an icon of the add. We want the add icon there. And then this will have our on pressed option. So when this is pressed, we want to go ahead and navigate to that new page we just created. So this is going to take the context. All right, so when the icon is pressed, we want to send this over to our new page. So to do that, we actually are going to use this navigator.push, and that will take the context and the new route. So the new route is actually going to be a material page route, and the builder will just be the context, and give it our new page route, which is actually going to be this new trip location view that we just created. So add that there. And this actually also needs to be, let's see, that will have a semicolon, that will have a comma. So this we actually need to import. So go ahead and import that new file we just created. All right, great. So now we should have our button here actually. And when we click the button, it should go to that new route we just created. All right, awesome. That looks good and it's working, and you can go back. Using this material page route is what allows us to have this kind of default back button and the animation already built into it. All right, so back in our location view, let's go ahead and change this up a bit. For the body, let's actually do a column. And the reason for this is because a column can have multiple widgets for its children. So for the first one, let's keep this text, and we can get rid of all of that. So after the text widget, let's go ahead and do a text field widget. And with this will be actually the text field where we can enter in that location. So a text field is going to take a controller, and the controller, which we actually need to create, so we can do that right here above the scaffold. So we just need a new text editing controller, and we're just going to call this the title controller, and that's just going to be a new text editing controller. All right, so then this controller we're going to give to this text field, and we're also going to autofocus this, so as soon as we come onto this page, it'll already be focused on this one text field. That looks good. You can also see the text field over here. Doesn't look great because it's going across the whole screen, so let's go ahead and add some padding to that. So highlight over the text field and do add padding. And then let's go ahead and increase this to about 30 and see how that looks. All right, you'll also notice everything's kind of pushed up to the top. So in our column here, let's go ahead and just center this whole thing. Centers us horizontally. but we also want to center it vertically. So right after this column, go ahead and do the main axis alignment, and let's set that to be centered as well. So it should center us vertically now. So after this padding here, we want to add our third element, which is going to be the raised button. So go ahead and add that. It will have the on pressed, but before that, let's go ahead and just give the button a title. And we'll just hit it with continue, which will be text and continue. All right, that looks good. And then when it's pressed, go ahead and create this functionality. We're actually going to want to, when we press it, we're going to want to save this value, this title controller, into a actual object. So to do that, we actually want to instantiate our new trip view with a trip object. So the first thing to do with that is to import that trip package, which will be like that. And then with this trip package, we can now say when we create any instance of this class, new trip view, it's going to have a variable which will be of type trip, and we're just going to call it a trip. And we're going to require that that variable is passed in when we create a new trip view. So to do that, you just write this, and this is a constructor for this class. So that'll be key and key. And then we're going to require a trip. All right, and just go ahead and write super key. All right, good. So now this is basically saying when we instantiate a new trip location view, it needs to be passed a trip with it. This just needs a semicolon here. So actually, when we're calling this class back in our home widget, we're going to need to add a trip here. So let's go ahead and say, similarly, we'll go ahead and add this trip class, or import this trip class, and then right here above the scaffold, go ahead and create a new trip, and we'll just call it new trip, and this will be really just an empty trip. So if you remember, there were 5 parameters in our trip, so let's just make them all null. All right, and then go ahead and give this new trip to our new trip location view as the trip. So what this is saying essentially is when we create this new trip view class, pass this empty new trip into it as the trip variable, which over here is going to be this trip variable. So now we can use this trip variable. So with this trip that's being passed in, we actually want to set the title of that to be the text field, to be the information in the text field. So to do that, set the title controller dot text to equal that trip title. And then just to quickly demonstrate this, we can pass in actually a title here, and you'll see if we click through, it'll show that immediately right there already. So that looks good, but for now let's leave this null, which actually might cause an error, but leave that for now. The next thing we want to do actually is when this button is pressed, we're back here now, and our raise button, when that's pressed, we want to update this trip title here, which is null, which is passed in as null. So we want to update that to equal basically the opposite of what this says, to equal the text in that text field. All right, and then you'll notice that we're getting an error here that title can't be used as a setter because it's set as final. And that's because over in our class here for trip, we have all of these as set as final values, which just means they can't be modified once they've been set. So since it was already set to null, it can't be updated. So just go ahead and remove all those finals there, because we actually do want to be able to update the data in our trip objects. So that should work now. And then finally, once we have this location set in here, so if it was Florence, when we hit continue, that's going to save, that's going to basically change our trip from null to be the title that was entered, which is Florence. And then once that happens, we're going to want to navigate to the next page, which is going to be the date page. So for that, again, we'll just use similar to how we navigate to this page, navigator.push, and it'll take the context and the route. And the route this time, again, will be the material page route, and it'll take context here. And this we haven't created yet, but it'll be a new trip date view. And similarly, it's going to be taking this same trip object is going to be passed into that too. So we can just write that now. All right, let's clean that up slightly. Let's see, that will have a semicolon and this will have a comma. So this isn't quite working because we have this new trip date view is not created. So let's go ahead and create that. That we're going to create in a brand new file as well. So go ahead and do a new Dart file, and it'll be just the date view. And this is going to be, there's going to be a lot of similarities here between these two. That's what we're going to be calling it. But let's go ahead and copy both of these imports. We can actually just copy this whole entire class and then just modify it. So copy that, but name it this. And then change this to date. This, when we instantiate it, will be the date now. But we do want it to require this trip object. Let's go ahead and call this just the, actually this is not, we're not going to have a text field on our date input, so let's just go ahead and remove that, but we'll leave the button. So enter a date is what it'll say. Actually, there's going to be two. There's going to be a start date and an end date. And this we can actually go ahead and wrap in a row so they're next to each other. All right, that looks good. Let's actually give this row as well some alignment, but let's do it evenly spaced. All right, there's no setting anything right there. For now, we won't. I guess this will be continue as well, and this is actually going to go to, after the date view, we're going to go to the budget view. That's going to take the trip as well. So let's go ahead and create that budget as real quick too. The budget will be a lot more similar to this location. Really, it'll be, for now, we'll just leave it the same. Just change this and this. For the budget for right now, let's just keep it with as minimal as possible. So let's get rid of let's get rid of basically all of the, let's just put a button on it for now. Because we're not going to really build out that in this video. So for example, when this button's pushed, we're actually gonna save it to Firebase. But first, let's go ahead and set this up so we have the pages working. So once we finish that, we're gonna, right here, once this button is pressed, we're going to save data to Firebase. And then we're going to redirect back to, that main home page. But we don't want to do the redirect with this push, because actually right now we have essentially, like, every time we push a new page on, it's stacking up on top, and that's why we can go back, navigate back like that. So what we want to do here is pop all these new pages that we've been pushing. We just want to pop them all off and go back to that main page. So the way we do that is actually delete. Go ahead and get rid of all that. So we do navigator, and we want the context of it. So of context, and we want to pop until, and then we're going to go ahead and say the route. So we want to pop until the route equals the first route. So route here, and then route, first route. So basically what this is going to do is, remove all of those pushed on views, and we're going to be back on our first page, which was that home page. So let's see. This will be the budget, but for now we're going to stop and just call it finished. So now if you save this, we should be able to navigate through them by hitting continue. Actually, that's right, we had that error here. So the new trip view is not being imported, so we just need to import, the location is going to go to the date, so just import the date view here. The date is going to go to the budget, so import that there. And now everything should work correctly. So if we're here, we enter, anything, continue, now we're on the date, and that's looks good. And then we continue here, and we can just finish. And then when we finish that, it clears off all those pages we added, and it brings us back to our main page. In the date view right here, we can update our dates with the date right now. So the start date, we can, similarly to how we were updating our title, we can, in the date view, just update our start date. And let's just go ahead and make that, the date time that it is right now. And then we can also update our end date here. So now we are passing that into our budget view. So the variables that we have so far updated in our trip object are the title, the start date, and the end date. And we want to update those we want to push those up into Firebase. So to do that, firstly, let's go ahead and just print those. That could be done here, not on press though, just in the regular above the button. So I already have those written out. Let's go ahead and see what that looks like now. So we enter a location, new location, and here we have the variable for location. In fact, we can also add that to our date view just so we see it. Let's go ahead and add that above this row. And you can see it's that new location. If you go back, since we saved that as the controller, it keeps it populated there. Anyway, the dates are just going to auto set to right now, and then you can see right here it's just printing out all that information. So this last piece is actually relatively simple to get it into Firebase, since we already configured Firebase with Firestore in the last video. Just go ahead in this budget view, go ahead and add our package here. All right, so right at the top of this class, go ahead and create an instance of Firebase, which is going to be called, we'll name it DB, and it'll be actually a Firestore instance. Firestore is what we're going to use for our database, not the real-time database. And actually, let's go ahead and configure that. So back in the Firebase console, go ahead and click on this database tab to the left. And pretty much the only thing you need to do to set this up is just click this create database and go ahead and do it in test mode right now. We want just complete access to it. We will add rules later once we have more once we know what the app should and should not do. I'm going to use US East. This is like a Northern Virginia server. The location is not a huge deal, but definitely click learn more. Just use the location that makes most sense for you. All right, and then that loads you up basically to the default cloud Firestore, which is what we want right here. So this is going to be where all our data starts piling in. We're not going to add it here in Firestore, although you can. We're going to just create it in the app, and it will automatically actually create those fields that we need. So we have our database instance here. All right, and then on this on pressed, we actually want to make this on pressed an asynchronous call. And that's because it's going to be sending data, so we don't want it to lock up our front end. So to save our data, we want to just use await and then do db, which is that variable we just created. Create a db collection. So this, if we already created our collection in here, we would name it what we created it there. But if we can just create it here, and it'll always just use that. So we're going to call it trips for now. We're going to talk about the structure of our Firebase data in a later video, but this is kind of just an example of getting simple data in there. And then go ahead and hit add, and this is going to create a new document right in this trips collection. So what we want to add is going to be basically all those fields that we have up here. We want to add our trip. I'll show you two ways to do this. The easiest way is just to add it right here. We're going to add the JSON. So that's going to be essentially like this, and it's going to be like, trip is going to equal our trip object dot title. Actually, this should not be trip. This should be title. Then our start date would be our, trip start date. And finally, our end date would be our trip end date. All right, this should work. And this is, since these are the only three pieces of data, like that makes sense to just do it like this right now. So go ahead and open back up. You can, normally this is pretty real time. So if you, it's not going to work for this one probably because the page is already loaded, but potentially it might actually. Go ahead and reload Firebase here. Yeah, okay, it did. And you'll see that trips are here now, and we have one trip, which we just created, and it should have our information, which, new location with the date and time from before. So great, that looks good. We're getting data into Firebase now, but there is actually a better way to write this out. Since we have our trip already created as an object, and we're going to, in theory, fill out all of these fields, not just these three, and put all those fields into Firebase, go ahead into our trip object over here in the trip class, and go ahead and create, basically we're going to create a function that will convert this into JSON. So it's going to do this piece right here. is going to output this piece right here. So it's pretty simple. It's actually, we're going to use a map, and because this is the type of JSON that Firebase actually takes. So our keys will be strings, and the data will be dynamic. So it could be really any type. And we're just going to call this to.json. And is going to return this JSON object here, which essentially is what we created right here. So go ahead and remove that. Remove that as well. We don't need the trip anymore because that's already been defined in the class. So just go ahead and remove that. Really, we want all of these. So go ahead and just add budget as well. And add travel type. All right, and then so over here on our, when we're adding to the database, now we can just call that trip object that we have and call the to.json method on it. And then that's going to basically just spit out that JSON, which is essentially what we were doing before. This is just a cleaner way to do it and much more reusable. So to test that again, we can do the same thing. We'll use our Florence example. Again, the dates are just going to default to right now. That's the data we're going to upload. Hit finish. It should go up into Firebase. Open that up. You'll notice there's a second one now. Must have clicked on that. Now there's a second document. If you click on that, you'll see all our fields are there, and these just default, or these are still set to null because we did not update those. All right, great. So we have data uploading to Firebase, and it looks really good. I'm not going to go through step by step completely how to design this whole creating a new trip process, but I will go ahead and finish that out myself and then show or continue on with the videos and show kind of, you know, a little bit of the trickier, more reusable pieces. So I think next we'll be selecting dates. So maybe I'll make a video just doing that specifically. But yeah, you now can see how you can upload data to Firebase and go ahead and update that with your own data for your own app. Or if you're following along with this and you're building like the exact same app, which is no problem, then you can see how you could fill out the rest of the data for that trip object. All right, good work. Ciao for now.